Ladies and gentlemen, if I can invite you to take a seat. We've got a very informative and purposeful morning to get through. Ladies and gentlemen, can I just welcome you this morning? My name's Andrew Broad. I'm the fairly new minted Assistant Minister to the Deputy Prime Minister. I tell my mates that means that I'm third in charge in case the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister go down a plane crash, but they know that really my job is to carry the bags for the Deputy Prime Minister. Can I encourage people, if they've got a mobile phone, to please turn it on to silent? And to say, to welcome you all here, can I acknowledge the traditional owners on the land that we meet, the elders past and present. This has always been a place of meeting, a meeting for big discussions about how we can improve communities, and today we're going to have a very worthwhile discussion around the release of the inquiry into the National Road Safety Strategy. Can I welcome firstly the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, Mr Michael McCormick, MP. Michael is a strong advocate for people being able to drive safely on our roads in a very practical sense. Later on I'll be able to welcome the Shadow Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Cities and Regional Development, Mr Honorary Anthony Albanese, and this is something that does have bipartisan support. How do we ensure that roads are safe to drive on? Can I welcome the co-chairs, Professor Jeremy Woolley and Dr John Crozier, who we're going to hear from shortly. My interest in this area stems from my time as a volunteer with the CFA, just a country boy as a farmer, and I thought we'd often just get to squirt out a bit of water on some grass to put out grass fires, and increasingly the role of the CFA is to attend accidents on our country roads. And I've spent, I remember one night, 3 a.m. in the morning, which was a double fatality, as we spent all night cleaning up. And can I say, what was amazing to me was a few years later the road was improved, and just by the upgrade of that road, that fatality probably would never have happened. So, you know, if there's things we can do better, we should do better. I'm going to invite to the microphone Associate Professor Jeremy Woolley and Dr John Crozier to discuss the final report and the recommendations of the independent inquiry, and then we're going to hear from different ministers, and we're going to have a panel session. So it'll be a very constructive morning. So can I please get you to join hands and welcome Dr John Dr John Crozier, and Jeremy Woolley. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister McCormack, Minister Chester, Minister McLeod, other ministers, friends and colleagues, all committed to a vision of zero deaths and serious injury on our roads in Australia. As a surgeon, I've been privileged to have been invited to co-chair this inquiry. Monday began as a routine week for me in Liverpool Hospital, whereas 21 years now a trauma surgeon, I commenced a vascular surgical elective list. By 9:30, we knew there was a young girl shocked following a road crash. She was brought expeditiously to the theatre next to where I was operating. As the operation proceeded and finished, I reflected. The 17-year-old woman had started that day going to school with her father, who was driving. Her blood on my gloves, the blood of the 7 units, each donated by a separate Australian, that had seen her resuscitated. But the body, abdomen open, a metre of bowel in a bucket, on her way to the intensive care unit. She just went back to theatre yesterday for the surgery to her L3 lumbar vertebrae, which had burst. She was one of 100 Australians who'd been managed in a similar way on Monday. This was the first of the third week of the last term of school. Each month, there are 100 of us who won't be here. If their graves were on the green grassed verge outside this Parliament, and each month we saw 100 graves, each month 100 graves, and each day we saw and reflected that there were 100 of us hospitalised for at least 24 hours, we wouldn't complacently accept business as usual. We would acknowledge what is otherwise a silent public health epidemic. And that is what brings this report now forward. The solutions are in this report. I'll hand across now to the co-chair, with whom it's been a privilege to share the journey of the last year, Professor Jeremy Woolley.
Thank you, John, for those words. And thank you, everybody, for attending today. And I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Darren Chester there as well, who initiated this inquiry and had the bravery to bring these issues into the open and challenge them openly. And we do acknowledge that effort. So thank you very much. I'd also like to acknowledge all the other parliamentarians in the room and special invited guests. Thank you for your attendance. And as Dr. Crozier has rightly done, he has set the scene on what is a serious hidden epidemic for the nation. And let's not mistake this. This is a national problem. Although other jurisdictions have responsibility for carriage of implementation and trying to resolve these issues with the resources they have, it is a national problem that needs sorting out, and we must address it. We owe it to the next generation to address it. If there is a single headline for this inquiry, it can read implementation failure. We have a current national road safety strategy that has many good features in it, features that would be a part of any world-leading strategy. However, it's obvious as the inquiry progressed that we lack the capacity and capability to execute a lot of the actions under that strategy. During the inquiry, we met with many groups of dedicated people, very talented people, who are nudging the nation forward with the battle to counter trauma on our roads. However, a lot of these groups have very few resources and very little influence relative to the scale of the problem they're trying to solve. So a second headline of the inquiry is stimulus and scale. We require significant scale to be achieved and the stimulus necessary to allow us to pursue the actions under the strategy. There is also, sadly, not much evidence to suggest that safety has been successfully mainstreamed into business as usual activity in all levels of government. Safety is still being treated as an add-on and being traded off against competing demands. Investment in the required change management has been deficient over the last decade, and we still encounter organisations all over the nation with cultural resistance that still counters the efforts to improve road safety. There is a need to get the house in order. Many infrastructure projects do still not yet have safety criteria associated with them. Life-saving vehicle technologies take too long to mandate. There are still significant data monitoring issues that must be resolved at the national level. And the tools, the frameworks and the quality assurance required to maintain alignment with a harm elimination agenda are largely absent. Sadly, we have yet to stop building high-risk roads in our system. We must create more realistic expectations regarding what organisations can contribute towards the ultimate elimination of harm. We cannot enforce our way out of the problem, nor can we build our way out of the problem. We must realign our thinking on the resources, the capacity and the talent required to bring safety and deliver safety to all Australians. As an example, local government manages 80% of the nation's road network, yet it contains 50% of casualty crashes on that network. Yet it has very limited resources to be able to pursue the road safety agenda, and there seems to be no solution on the horizon. How then can we expect a performance increase in this sector as specified under the national strategy? The inequity between metropolitan and rural and regional areas must also be acknowledged, and further innovation is required to identify harm reduction strategies. In terms of focus, there is a need to move from coping with the situation to finally fixing it. And we need to move from a focus on managing fatalities to managing injury. Much of the injury claim costs are incurred 2 years following a crash. Therefore, our perspectives on road safety have to change. The problem must be viewed beyond a road agency lens, and our traditional business models need to be reconsidered. Solutions must involve other sectors, such as health, insurance, urban planning, workplace safety, and sectors such as electricity supply and also telecommunications. We must understand how we can eliminate harm on the road network and better understand how that journey might look over the next 30 years. Some parts of the system are already achieving zero harm. Children in school zones in some areas, road lengths re-engineered to virtually eliminate fatalities, townships with successive years of zero on their roads. While many discuss the fact that autonomous vehicles may be our salvation, we currently lack the required agility to manage the transition. And in fact, we are at risk of missing out on the opportunity to maximise the benefits of driver assist systems that are likely to flood the market over the next 30 years. The inquiry has delivered 12 recommendations that, if implemented, will transform the road safety performance of the nation and protect future generations. Several key recommendations focus on creating a climate for success. The appointment of a Federal Minister for Road Safety in achieving a point of national accountability. Following a governance review, a creation of a national entity to support the nation's road safety response, and a $3 billion road safety fund to provide the necessary stimulus and scale required to achieve the desired step change, and progressively remove the unnecessary suffering and economic drag to the nation. I'd like to hand you back to Dr. Crozier.
Jeremy, thank you. And the panel of inquiry would like to acknowledge the significant debt that we owe Minister Chester for standing this inquiry up, for the Deputy Prime Minister, McCormack, in sustaining the spirit of the endeavour. We've got to act on a scale to halt the carnage that we've become complacent accepting. We can't look to 2030 with 15,000 of us dead and 400,000 seriously injured at a cost of $300 billion. That is not acceptable. The Australian community expects different. Now, as a species, we've come a long way. Ultimately, we're still very fragile creatures. The fundamental difference between us is we can actually identify in our mind where as a species we want to be. We're blessed in this country to live in a great ancient southern land held in trust for over 60,000 years. Today, in this beautiful structure, Romaldo Giugola's idea, artisans from all over the globe, many born in Australia, many not, using products, the Jarrah from Western Australia, the Huon pine from Tasmania, crafted this building that began as an idea in a single person. Now, all of us in this room have the same vision. We can see zero deaths on our roads and we can see zero injuries. We need to make that happen. By 2030, there need to be none of us killed or seriously injured in our major metropolitan centres, in our major rural centres, on the main highways between by 2030. And by 2050, none of us need be killed or seriously injured as we travel to our place of work or as we move to and from our homes. We can't have our school children horrifyingly injured in the way the girl I described at the beginning. That has to stop. So I acknowledge the quality of, the depth of the submissions, and there have been multiple. The solutions are all in front of us. The key now is to bring that architectural concept to reality. We can't continue to prevaricate. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the inquiry, we thank you for the privilege of being able to deliver this report today, and we fully acknowledge this is the step on a very significant journey from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We have a framework. Now, is Honorary Anthony Albanese here? I'm going to introduce him, but he's not here to step up to the plate. So if that's not there, we might go across now to the Deputy Prime Minister to give some comments. Michael McCormack, of course, is the Deputy Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia, a very strong advocate for safety on our roads because he's a rural Australian. For many people who live in regional Australia, we have limited public transport options. We drive on country roads. We drive at night on country roads. We drive to take our children to sport. We drive in our businesses. We drive trucks to get our products to marketplace. And to have a rural Australian, a regional Australian as the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia helps us understand greatly that the road issue is not just an urban issue, but is also about us being able to conduct our business, conduct our lives and come home safely. So can you please welcome the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, Mr Michael McCormack.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, and acknowledge my colleagues, my parliamentary colleagues and friends all, and certainly acknowledge the panel and acknowledge Jeremy and John. Gee whiz, when the good doctor spoke, you couldn't have heard a pin drop had one fallen to the floor, and that's very rare in this place. It's the sobering message that he told, the sobering message that he often tells. You know, it really strikes a chord within all of us. I appreciate very much the role, the work, the effort that's gone into the inquiry, the report and the recommendations. I acknowledge Darren Chester. I know Darren has been a fierce advocate for road safety, not just during his time in this place, but indeed his entire adult life. And he, like many of us as a parent, he, like all of us, wants to work towards that Vision Zero. And I wish Anthony Albanese was here, and I'm sure he will be in a minute, but when you're in Parliament and you're new to Parliament and you see those opposite you, you know, there's always that argy-bargy between both sides of Parliament. But I heard Anthony Albanese give a speech one night on the Kempsey bus crash, Clybucca Flat, where 35 people died. And there weren't many people in the Parliament that night, but it really, to this day, struck a strong chord in me. The fact that, you know, I always knew he was genuine, but that really, and here he is now. I'm just talking about you, Anthony, and that speech you gave in the Parliament one night about the Kempsey bus crash in 1989. It wasn't in 1989 you'd made the speech, but it really, to me, showed what a genuine person that Anthony Albanese is, and I know he, like me, and like all the parliamentarians, like all of us in this room, want to work, want to strive, want to do everything we can towards Vision Zero. I want to acknowledge a couple of people on the panel. Emma and Peter Coburn from Young. They head up the Georgina Josephine Foundation. It means a bit to me. I too have a daughter called Josephine. It's called Georgina, and their loss has inspired them to do what they can to prevent unnecessary driveway deaths. And we have Peter Fraser, a great mate of mine from the Sarah Group. Now, Peter's daughter, Sarah, was driving to Wagga Wagga, my hometown, back in 2012, February 2012, just 23. She sadly died on the Hume Freeway. And Peter has now committed his every waking minute to making sure that that doesn't happen to someone else. We all have been touched, no doubt, by the human face, the human tragedy that is the road toll, the road trauma, and I think, Doctor, you have really brought the message home to us today. And of course, we can and we are doing good work as a government with our money that's being spent on infrastructure. I acknowledge your recommendations as to the fact that we need to do more and we need to build safety more into that infrastructure rollout. I know that we've certainly as a nation come a long way with mandatory seatbelt wearing, with random breath testing, with safer and better vehicles, and I know Fatality-Free Friday, I see Russell White there, and I know the good work that he's doing and ANCAP are doing and Lauchlan, McIntosh and all the organisations, all the individuals are doing. We need to do more. We will do more. Thank you for your report. I will certainly take on board its recommendations and report back in due course. But thank you very much for coming to this very important event this morning. Alex Gallagher and Lou O'Brien, the parliamentary co-chairs of the Friends of Road Safety here in Parliament. They do a great job too, and I know for them it's also a personal crusade. So thank you very much. I look forward to hearing more from the panel and from others this morning at this very important event. But if you could spread the word, spread the message that we all need to do what we can when we get behind a wheel of a car, and indeed when we're a passenger. I think that's so important too. I've always said it's not just the driver of the vehicle, it's that person sitting in the passenger seat. If the driver is indeed driving too fast or not obeying the road rules, I've always said, I say it to my 3 children, I say it to anybody who cares to listen, make sure you tell them to slow down, make sure you tell them to obey the road rules. It's so critical. Thank you, panel. I very much appreciate your efforts, and we'll certainly strive as a parliament and as a government to do what we can to work towards that Vision Zero. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. We will now invite the Shadow Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Cities and Regional Development, the Honourable Anthony Albanese. Now, everyone is on a journey in politics. Just wait a minute here. Everyone is a journey on politics. You know, you might start off in the Greens, you then move to the Labor Party, you then become a Liberal Party, and then when you hit utopia, you are a Nationals. You know, you've seen the light, and Albo's getting close. He was recently at the Nationals, where we all get together and have a lunch on a Thursday, and he was sitting at the table. So you're on the journey, you're almost there, and this is something where I think there is bipartisanship around how do we make sure our roads are safe. Can you please welcome the Shadow Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Cities and Regional Development, the Honorary Anthony Albanese.
Look, thank you very much. I acknowledge the traditional owners of country and pay my respect to their elders past and present. Now, there's an old saying I say to my comrade, Andrew Broad, which is what goes on tour should stay on tour. And what goes on in National Party lunches should stay there as well, I think. I think what that confirms is that if ever there was any doubt, never get between a politician and a free lunch. So I'm available every Thursday to attend the lunch in Michael McCormack's office. Actually, it's a good start, because the reason why I was there was to talk to Michael about the ways in which we could, as the Minister and the Shadow Minister, cooperate and get things done. And I pay tribute to Michael as the new Minister for being prepared to sit down and just say, what do you know? Where do you think we could do better? Where can we work together? And there is no area where that is more important than in the area of road safety. That's not about politics, it's not about partisanship. And I thank the committee for who've done this inquiry. The truth is that after a long period of decline, year after year after year, it has reversed in the last few years, tragically. And there is a whole range of reasons for that. Frankly, as the Minister who set up the National Road Safety Strategy on my watch over 10 years, we thought those 3 themes that you could do of technology, things like ESC and a range of other things being brought into motor vehicles. The big revolutionary change, of course, in Australia was seatbelts. Education and personal behaviour was important, as well was the second tier. And the third, and one which we can have responsibility for, is of course infrastructure, making sure that our roads are better. The heavy vehicle safety program was all about making sure that trucks have a place to stop, and those laws are important as well. There is a relatively new element, technology, which we always saw as a great advancer, and it is in many ways, but there's other technology that has not proven positive, the distractions, and that has to go a fair way to explaining why the curve has suddenly changed. I mean, what else has changed except for the distractions which are there? And so I really think that having this inquiry, and I pay tribute to the former Minister, Darren Chester, who initiated this response. Darren had to leave. But it is important that we continue to be prepared to take a step back and seek advice from people, both people who are experts in road safety through their work, but also people who unfortunately are experts in the consequences of tragedies on our roads. Michael spoke about the Clybucca bus crash. I've got to say, sitting around in a cabinet table, and this is a reflection on a bipartisan bad reflection, sitting around the cabinet table during the global financial crisis that I was reminded this morning on the radio, I wouldn't have known otherwise. It's 10 years since the collapse of Lehman Brothers. One of the things that we had there, sitting down about what work could be done, was that the site of the Clybucca bus crash, Australia's worst ever road disaster, all those years later, in spite of the coronial inquiry clearly recommending that the duplication of the Pacific Highway was a priority, still had not been done. Not only that, the planning had not been done between Fredericton and Ewinguy, an indictment of Labor, Liberal and National parties, the fact that that had not occurred. After all of that time, we can and must do better. I was particularly conscious about the Pacific Highway. My name, Anthony, is from my cousin, who my uncle and auntie moved up the north coast, as many people did, away from Sydney after the Second World War, built a motel and truck stop at Halfway Creek, in between, literally halfway, funnily enough, between Coffs Harbour and Grafton. This little boy ran out onto the Pacific Highway and lost his life just before I was born. And his name was Anthony. And they changed the name of the motel to Anthony's Motel. It would be familiar for people who are from the north coast of New South Wales on the Pacific Highway, because it's the only real stop, or it was, between Grafton and Coffs there, which is about halfway as well. People would stop going between Sydney and Brisbane. And I was born just soon afterwards, hence I was given his name. So when you're named after a victim of a road tragedy, then you are very conscious about it. And I was very personally committed to fast-tracking the Hume, but also the Pack Highway, whereby there have been 500 tragedies over the years. I mean, if that happened, if you spoke about 500 people dying in an individual building or an individual incident, you would be determined to do something about it. And I pledge again today that I will work with the Minister and work across the Parliament on these issues. We can and we must do better. We have to reverse the trend, and the aim, of course, of zero is absolutely what we have to aim for. And the world will change over coming decades. We need to make sure that it changes. Change is permanent, but we can shape that change. We can accelerate it in ways that improve road safety by making sure that we have the best technology available, the best education of both drivers and passengers available, that we do everything that we can. So I thank the Minister. I welcome this report, and on behalf of the opposition, I say that I've been struck by the fact that whatever other differences that we have, all of the ministers that I've had to shadow, there's been a few, in recent times, have all shared that commitment, but none more so than this bloke, Michael McCormack. So I thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Now, if you could, with the indulgence of the crowd, we're just going to just take some quick photos with the Deputy Prime Minister and the Shadow Minister and the inquiry chairs, and then we're going to go to a panel session. So if we could just quickly get some photos for the inquiry chairs.
There's our photographers.
Everyone jump up a quick photo and then we'll get into the round table. They want you for your look.
They don't want me to.
Yes, they do. Fabulous. Well, now we come to a very insightful part of the morning's proceedings, which is going to be a roundtable with people who have got long experience and frankly have lived the issue of road safety in their own personal lives, in their professional lives as well. So I'll just welcome Craig Newland, also James Goodwin, Russell White, Lauchlan McIntosh, also of course Jeremy Woolley, John Crozier, Peter Fraser, and Emma and Peter Cockburn. What I'll invite you to do in your own, you can work it out amongst yourselves. We've got about 10 minutes for you to make some opening comments, and then we're going to have a roving microphone so that we can have some questions from the audience, and we'll have a very good general discussion about, what are the challenges and how we can make things better. So, in your hands to decide amongst yourselves.
I guess we start at one end and work down.
Okay, yeah, we're Peter and Emma Coburn, and we're the Georgina Josephine Foundation. Who we are that number on that stat, that pie graph that you see. We are the family that lost our child to a low-speed run over. I'm also that person that ran over their child. How would that happen? Well, I ask you, what we did. I come home from work like I do every day. I reversed my tool trailer into my garage. I thought my kids were safe inside. That door was open. She crawled in to come and say hello to me. With the vehicle I had, I didn't see her. And when I get back and have a look at that time, I had no chance. I hopped out of that car and realised I lost my girl on the spot. On her deathbed at that hospital, Emma and I made a promise to do everything in our power to actually prevent this accident from happening. And when we did our research, it actually has a phase. It's low speed runovers. It's a thing. So our aim is to prevent this accident from happening, make our vehicles a lot better, make our housing industry a lot better, and most of all, make our education that people can realise that it can happen to anyone at any time. And also then, when it happens so often, there's a new thing. We've got to support the other families that have been through the same thing. And that's our aim.
So our key concerns, one of the things that we talk about road safety, sometimes I think we should say road and vehicle safety, because death by vehicle doesn't always happen just on a road. It can happen on the side of the road. It can happen in your driveway at home. It can happen in a car park at the shops, anywhere, anytime, as Peter said. So some of the key concerns we have in terms of what we're dealing with, statistics and data, because low-speed runovers are not necessarily included in the national road toll because they don't happen on a road. It's very hard to get accurate data. The last report the federal government put out, the national average of deaths of children 0 to 14 was 7 deaths a year. I can tell you from my own collection of statistics, just out of news reports online, the national average over the last 8 years is now 9 deaths a year. So the stats are going up. It's not a huge amount, but when you consider that these are people running over their own kids, the effect that has, I know firsthand that there's at least 2 families that have been affected by suicide. The parents committed suicide in the last 3 years, months down the track, because they couldn't cope with what had happened. So a low-speed runover isn't just an accident that you stitch them at hospital and that's it. There is ongoing effects, just like any road trauma. So stats and data, we need to get that together accurately so we can actually see how often it happens. Prevention is a big thing. Prevention is way better than cure, as anyone will be able to tell you who's had to deal with the results of road trauma. Physical, home environment barriers, physical barriers, vehicle systems, and education and awareness is probably the most important. If in order, like not just low-speed runovers, but any road safety issue, I think if you're serious about changing the numbers, you need to go to the local communities and get to local people and get into their minds and change that mindset. Someone said to me once about the litter in the bin ads that used to go around a long time ago. You know, that changed people's mindsets. Once upon a time, people didn't care about a bit of rubbish on the side of the road. Now, if you see someone chuck rubbish out of the window, it's like, because that mindset has been changed. We need to do the same thing in terms of road safety. We need to change the attitudes of people so that when they open that door to get in that car, they are thinking in terms of what they're actually doing and the safety involved. For us, the education and awareness involves everybody, but in particular, key audiences. So we target parents, of course. We target learner drivers because, as far as I'm concerned, safe driving habits start when you start to learn to drive. If you can get those habits embedded in especially the young kids, when they're getting in those vehicles to drive, hopefully that carries throughout their driving career. Corporates and employees, someone talked about work and the safety in terms of work, and actually having that attitude of, it's not just a she'll be right mate, but it's an attitude that we have to make sure that everyone is on board with. When you come to work, you work safely. And for us, it's not only about working safely at work, but it's actually getting home safely to your family and keeping them safe as well. The building and construction industry, actually getting the industry to look at what they're actually doing when they design people's residential properties. We have a lot of shared driveways, shared car parking spaces with unit complexes and things like that, especially in urban areas. What are people doing with the design of that so they can ensure the separation between vehicles and pedestrians? Car parks. I hate shopping centre car parks. They're designed for cars. They're not designed for mums with prams and babies and toddlers. How are you supposed to get all of that from your car into the shopping centre without the fear of somebody knocking you over on the way? So all of that sort of thing needs to be taken into consideration. Of course, vehicle manufacturers and importers, looking at that whole vehicle design system. Our Australian design rules should include a design reversibility standard that doesn't just include visibility out the back like the NRMA index does, which is great, it's a fantastic tool, but what about the other technology that's available, the sensors and especially autonomous emergency braking in reverse. That is what's going to stop an accident. A camera's not going to stop an accident. But if we have all of those sorts of tools and things in place, there's more chance of reducing that risk. So, I mean, our key messaging when we do target our different audiences, we have low-speed runovers happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime. Supervised Separate C is especially the general public and the family one that we use, which is consistent with Kids Safe Australia and Kids and Traffic, their messaging that they take out to the general public and to families, community groups, things like that. For us, with talking to learner drivers, safe driving starts before you get in the car, and that is so relevant to so many road safety incidents. And of course, changing our mindset. It won't happen to me. And we were those parents. We would see this incident on TV, on the news, and go, geez, that's terrible, but my kids are safe. We knew all about road safety. We knew all about keeping kids away from the cars, and it still happened to us. So getting people to move from won't happen to me to might happen to me, what have I got to do to prevent it? And that's so relevant for a lot of key areas. So that's us in a nutshell. Thank you.
Vision Zero. No one should die on our roads today. Everyone should get home safe. We have to change the mindset of how we both build roads, maintain roads, and get out there and drive. Talked a little bit about the issue of distracted driving. It's always a tough drive for me to come down to Canberra because, of course, I drive over exactly where my beautiful daughter was killed. Her car breaks down. The NRMA's called. She's going to get towed away. But we built the Hume Freeway, our most important road in Australia, not to our Austroad standards. We didn't maintain it to those Austroad standards. So her vehicle overhangs into a 110 km/h zone. Until I was brought into this space, when that distracted driver drives directly in, killing Sarah, leaving her in pieces on that Hume Freeway, leaving the NRMA agent, the tow truck driver, who was called to assist. You know, my background was in compliance and policy, law enforcement and intelligence. I was working as a manager for Roads and Maritime Services. But I hadn't taken it on as my personal responsibility. I heard about, people being killed. I drive the M4 in Sydney all the time. You'd hear on the radio that there's been a crash and someone on the road ahead had been killed, and there's a bank up of 3 or 4 kilometres. That's the last thing we ever heard of that person. We talk about accidents. These are crashes that we're having out there. We talk about statistics, but behind it is a family, loved ones, community grieving. I have no pleasure in saying I'm still in counselling 6.5 years later. Since my own beautiful daughter was killed, we've had more than 8,000 Australians killed on our roads. We've had more than 200,000 people seriously injured. But it's all hidden. One of the things that I'm so grateful for the work that's been done for this report, and I also want to acknowledge Darren and the Deputy Prime Minister for their leadership in this area, but it's all bipartisan. You look at it and you think, everyone has been affected and everyone wants to make change, but we've actually got to be very genuine about how we attack this. We need to talk about stopping the crash. AEB, one of the most fundamental ways of avoiding having that incident. We don't talk about anymore near misses, let's talk about near hits. The number of people who are out there on the roads, our traffic managers, I deal a lot across industries now, and I'm very privileged to be able to say that. Because we forget that everyone's got a right to get home safe. Every day, no exceptions. I'm struggling right now with some debate with New South Wales Government. They've just implemented a new road rule, our slow down, move over, which was one of the 2 primary things that we had in a petition, which raised 23,000 signatures in just 8 weeks back in May 2012. That was delivered to the Premier in New South Wales. One of those two things was to ensure that we slow down and give people the space they need to be safe on our roads. Personally, I'm a RFS. Like yourself, I'm out there primarily fighting fires, but under the current regulation in New South Wales, the road rule, my life will be protected because I've got red and blue lights on a vehicle, but the NRMA and our tow truck drivers won't be. No one has to slow down for them. You say, why is my life more important than those who are out there servicing more than 1.8 million, this is just in New South Wales, breakdowns a year? Why should my life be more important? So we've actually got to say, what can we actually do to make those sorts of changes? What sort of leadership can we bring to it? What's the best practice within Australia? And then we have the jurisdictions all go for that same best practice. The Commonwealth is in an extraordinarily important position because of the funding that's provided. We have the ability to talk about road safety as integral, and I'm extraordinarily proud that the people in this House are actually leaders in road safety. But we need to ensure that we act as Australians, not as individual states and territories. We also need to ensure that the cars that we import, we set minimum standards. I've just bought a little Mazda 3 Series, which comes with AEB as standard. Stop the crash. Everyone gets home safe. We don't implement the EU requirement to have vests, and we actually take the vests and the triangles out of vehicles. Minor things that can be changed immediately. What are the things that we can do to protect people on the roads? Those are the things that I'm very proud that this report's actually talked about, and how we can make a change as Australians. We've got to talk about us as Australians, and everyone's got the right to get home safe every day. No exceptions.
We might. I think that'd be a good place to launch into some questions, because we've heard the real coalface of the issue that we're talking about here today. And in the interest of time, we've got 10 minutes. So I'd like to open it up for a general discussion, because I know there will be questions. There will be roving microphones, and I'll get you to put your hand up and a microphone to come across to you, sir. And I want, if you can clearly state your name, so that, because it is being recorded, so we can all clearly hear what you've got to say, and you can direct your question to the panel generally or to an individual.
I direct it to the panel. Harold Scrooby, Chairman, Pedestrian Council of Australia. I've been in road safety for over 25 years, representing what we call the walking class. I commend everyone here for this project. I think everyone here is united in one cause, to reduce the tragedy and trauma on our roads. However, I do see one giant elephant in the room. I've seen many of these reports, and the biggest problem is what we call our 9 separate railway gauges in our mentality as Australians. We have 9 separate jurisdictions, and they are all mostly all sovereign. I'll give you a very quick example as to why I see we've got to find a way so that the Commonwealth can not only lead the way, but in fact force the way, so that these documents are required to be complied with, not just signed off on. Now, back in 2011, Anthony Albanese signed the last 2011 to 2020 road safety strategy. And pretty well everything in it made great sense. It made the point that speed was the greatest killer on our road. It then pointed to fabulous technology, and we all know technology is the big silver bullet. And it said the point-to-point speed cameras save so many lives overseas, we must implement them. Now, 9 people signed this document, and they all agreed that within 3 years, they would turn on the point-to-point speed cameras for all vehicles. Now, John Crozier, you and I and a lot of people here wrote to the New South Wales government, and we wrote to Mr Chester, and we said, please, tell the New South Wales government to turn on these point-to-point cameras for all vehicles. It's a flick of a switch. 14 people have died in these zones. 14 people up to 2016, all from speed-related crashes. And yet we can't, no one can, force this New South Wales government into changing this ridiculous policy of only booking truck drivers, when the evidence now shows that over 90% of truck drivers involved in crashes, it's other driver at fault, primarily speeding. Why can't we get a system here? The Commonwealth pays for all the damage. Only recently we've got a new government.
So, Harold, we've got a lot of people who want to ask questions.
Final point,
so, yep.
Northern Territory, open speeds, the only place in the Western world, a territory where the federal government could have intervened and said, change this policy, you've got the highest death toll in the Western world. They had open speeds on undivided roads. They were able to intervene and make euthanasia unlawful, but no one wants to step in. And the elephant in the room is politics. So please, we have a commitment here, a written commitment to turn on all those speed cameras for all vehicles in New South Wales. Every other jurisdiction has done it. I ask the panel, how is this system that you've got invented here, which is terrific, every word is correct, but how are you going to enforce it?
Okay, thank you.
Could I speak on behalf of the panel and from the outset commend Harold Scrooby for a passionate lifetime lived in support and particularly for the most vulnerable. It's been a privilege to have Harold participate as a community representative on the Royal Australasian College of Surgeons Trauma Committee and see over the years the passion that he has brought. He has rightly identified selective implementation as a significant part of why we have failed to honour a reasonable commitment to reduce serious injury and death by 30% in the decade we're currently 8 years into. And rightly, it is the selective implementation of a science acknowledged in a multipartite way at the beginning of that decade. A single jurisdiction had been singled out by Harold in his talk. The New South Wales jurisdiction, to its credit, has many more per head of population of these entities than other states. Other states have been slower in their uptake. But the key point, speed management, is where we will get our easiest win. Point-to-point is a science technology that is much better evidence than it was 7 years ago when we started the journey. You're absolutely right, riven by competitive federalism, that is not going to get the advance that we actually need as a community. So I do commend you, Harold, for the strength and passion that you bring to this, and echo the science that evidences the benefit of point-to-point for all road users. In partnership too, health needs to bring forward the message. This is not about revenue raising. This is about an improvement at a safety level, an inherently safe system in consequence that's much safer for all road users. And health, again, we fail on advocacy, failing to bring forward the message, the benefit, the health benefit of the implementation and use of this sort of technology. So again, Harold, I do commend you for the courage and the consistency of your message across a life well lived in support of the most vulnerable on our roads, particularly our pedestrians.
Thank you. Do we have further questions? One over here. We've got 4 minutes, so we're on a tight time frame.
Okay, I'll be quick. Thank you. I'm Claire Howe. I'm the CEO of the Australasian College of Road Safety. We're a peak membership organisation for road safety across Australasia, and we have a few of our members in this room today, and all of you on the panel are our members. I'd just firstly like to say thank you to the co-chairs and Lauchlan and Rob for undertaking this inquiry, because in the political environment that you have to deal with, it hasn't been an easy road, but you have managed to speak to, interview, receive submissions from the huge stakeholder community across Australia and put together this fantastic report. And I hope that when we look back, we see this as the pivotal moment in Australia which changes the face of road safety for our country, and that other countries can look to us again and see us as leaders internationally, because we used to be leaders internationally. We've slipped, And I think this really has the potential to put us at the top again. Thank you so much for all your work and foresight, and thank you to Darren Chester and his staff. Michael Dobby was fantastic, and to the Deputy Prime Minister for just keeping this issue on the boil, and your staff as well have been absolutely fantastic. And the question I would ask to the Deputy Prime Minister and to the panel is, how can we support you in the next steps to keep this issue at the forefront of everyone's minds? We have the stakeholders behind us, the inquiry panel have the stakeholders behind them, and we want the community behind us, and we want to support you to make sure this doesn't fall off the political spectrum with everything that goes on. So how can we support you? And just a comment to Harold Scrooby and the point that you made about the speed cameras, the point-to-point cameras. In my opinion, the political issue is that the politicians don't believe the community want the cameras turned on for light vehicles, but in fact the research shows they do. So it's getting that message to the politicians to change the way that they're seeing that issue. So yeah, I would ask you, Deputy Prime Minister, how we can help you support this report.
Yeah, well, I guess Michael, come on here.
And thank you very much, and thank you too for your organisation and for what they do. I guess I won't say maintaining the rage, but I just did. But writing letters to not just the transport and infrastructure and road ministers of state parliaments, but indeed also to oppositions. We have got a few elections coming up, obviously, and getting those commitments from them and seeing where they're at the moment. Insofar as point-to-point technology is concerned, and turning it on would be a good start.
Can I also make just one comment on that? I think when we also look at, and Russell White from the Australian Road Safety Foundation, I think when we look at the road safety plan as a whole, we've got to look at how we get the community involved. Having the enforcement there is definitely part of the answer, as well as the safer vehicles and safer roads. But part of our main mission is to get the community, no matter how they're using the road network, whether they're a pedestrian, a cyclist, a driver, or a rider of any description, it's changing that cultural belief. And I would agree with Claire that I think in our work that we do, people do want to do something about road safety. Quite often they don't know what they want to do or how they can support it, but there is a need out there. And I think one of the great things about the leadership that's been shown with this, and I remember a turning point in my own career. Fortunately, I wasn't impacted from a direct death personally within my family, but I remember hearing someone from the UN talking about road safety is about leadership. And it's until we get that leadership, that central leadership, everything else will fall down as I guess a part of that. So again, I think this is a pivotal point and a historical point in our road safety journey to take us to the next direction.
Very good. Now, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately we are completely out of time. 10 o'clock was the deadline we were up against, but that does not mean that there is an opportunity for continued discussion. There are some light refreshments at the back of the room. Can I thank the panel members? Can I thank the Shadow Minister for Infrastructure and Transport, Anthony Albanese, who had to leave, and can I thank the Deputy Prime Minister, who I know has to leave to head to another meeting. And you know, I think the words when I had a conversation with Peter Fraser this morning said there's been a lot of meetings in this place over the last month, including changing the Prime Minister and a few other things like this. He said, this is the most important meeting we've had in this place in the last month. So may this be the beginning of safer roads and zero fatalities by 2050. Thank you very much. Please hang around and enjoy the conversation. Thank you.